Hey guys, another quick set of thoughts here. Today, what's most on my mind is foam rolling. Now, anybody who's followed my online presence in any way, shape, or form, at least in terms of social media, knows kind of how I feel about it, but I wanted to articulate a few thoughts and talk about something that came out recently. It was posted online that might be worth discussing. Well, first off, foam rolling, of course, is this idea that you can take a piece of foam or plastic, some kind of implement, and roll it around with a certain amount of force on your muscles, or put your body with your muscles on top of the roller, depending on how you want to apply the force, and get a certain effect in terms of improvement in range of motion or a decrease in pain, a reduction in soreness or some kind of aid in recovery, etc. And we probably all know somebody who's done this, and who swears by it. I know a lot of people who are damn near addicted, to their foam rollers. And we all have routines. We all have our rituals and things we like. And that's fine. I have no issue with that. But what I do have an issue with is when people try to twist science, or when they try to misrepresent what literature actually says, what research actually says. And one major issue with foam rolling is when people insist on calling it self-myofascial release, which makes it sound really cool, but it doesn't make any sense. Based on everything, at least that I understand about the qualities of the tissues involved, you can't really release fascia, be it myofascia, which is the fascia that is surrounding muscles, or any other kind of fascia, from anything else by pushing down into it with a foam roller. To explain this idea, imagine I have a layer of fascia here and then I have another one on top, right? If we're looking kind of like cross-sectionally at a muscle, and there's a muscle and then there might be layers of tissues around it, right? Crisscrossing over each other. Well, if I need to release maybe this top layer from the bottom layer, what am I going to do? Do I want to just push straight down? Well, no, it just kind of will squish things together. However, if I provide some kind of friction that pulls it back one way or the other, or separates them this way, then maybe an argument could be made that I could possibly release something from something. But the problem is the majority of the force that's going into the body whenever you put a foam roller on somebody is going straight down. If you would imagine, I'm taking some kind of object and just rolling it straight over the skin, and yeah, it's moving this way, but it's not dragging really hard across this way, and it's not gripping a piece of fascia and pulling it either way. Most of the force is actually compressing the fascia together. So if anything, you're probably accomplishing the opposite. But that's really neither here nor there, because even if you do a manual technique where you grab things and wiggle them around, there's little evidence to suggest that that really will do anything meaningful. Most people who study the properties of these kinds of tissues, people like surgeons or others who study tissue, whether it's histology or whatnot, will probably take issue with this idea that you can release pieces of fascia with a piece of foam or with just manual techniques. Because think about the amount of pressure that's on your leg muscles just when you sit in a chair and wiggle around. I mean, if fascia were really that sensitive to being deformed or being moved around, it seems to me we'd have some serious issues, just from lying down, sitting down, rolling around, or anything, right? The stuff wouldn't just move when we want it to move. It would be moving anytime sufficient force is put there. And most surgeons will say the only time you're really going to release fascia or adhesions, that's another thing that gets talked about, is with a scalpel. And based on my understanding, that's pretty much the case. So you're probably not breaking up any kinds of scar tissue. I'm not even convinced that we can identify scar tissue reliably when you look at at the body, look at the skin and feel around. I mean, you might feel a lump of something, but how do you know what that lump is? Is it a glob of fat? Is like a lipoma or something? Or is it actually a piece of scar tissue? Is it a benign tumor? Is it a bundle of blood vessels? Is it an inflamed chunk of nerve tissue? Is it some weird formation in muscle? Is it an outgrowth of fascia? And these are just things off the top of my head. We don't know, right? Yet people are trying to get us to believe that you can identify this stuff and then reliably break it up with a piece of foam. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ludicrous. So that was the thought I wanted to share and actually articulate in a video, because a lot of people talk about this stuff and really don't, I don't think, stop to think about what really could be going on with these tissues that we're trying to manipulate. What are we really trying to do whenever we push down on something? Whenever we do a massage or a stretch or whatever. Now, people will come back and say, well, I noticed something, my range of motion improves, and I feel this effect or that effect. Okay, sure, that's fine. And in fact, we've done studies, there are studies that are out there that you can read that do address that and show, at least in certain cases, that you do get improvements in range of motion. The muscles seem to relax in some way. I've even seen one or two that possibly show evidence of improvements in power in certain instances, though I don't know if that's been done enough in the literature to say that there's really evidence for it. But we do know it can alleviate pain subjectively. Some people seem to like it, and there are changes in range of motion. So that's fine, but the mechanism isn't what people say it is. I would bet money on that. Based on what I've seen in the literature and based on what I understand about the tissue properties, you're not separating layers of fascia. And in fact, one more point about fascia to think about, and this has been talked about a lot in some of my circles lately. Fascia doesn't stretch. Not really. Muscles don't really stretch in the way we think either, but that's another discussion. But fascia is pretty tight, pretty taut, and it has to be. If you think about muscles that attach into fascia, like the TFL muscle, the tensor fasciae lata. That's a muscle that crosses your hip joint and attaches into your IT band. The IT band is one of the most well-known chunks of fascia in the body, right? It's a thick sheet that runs from your ilium, it's called the iliotibial band, runs from your ilium down to your tibia. It's your shin bone or your lower leg bone. And it really is involved in tension generation and helping with gait, helping with controlling the knee joint and the hip joint together. It's a very important piece of tissue. The TFL, the tensor fasciae lata muscle, attaches into that. Now, if that fascia were stretchy, that would be a problem, because then that muscle way up high, way up top in the pelvis or in the hip joint wouldn't be able to deliver force down to the other end very effectively. Imagine trying to pull a weight across the floor with a rubber band, right? It's not going to be as easy to do as with a rope, right? Because when you pull a rope, once you take out all the slack and it's taut, you pull and the thing moves, assuming you're pulling hard enough to move it. But if you're pulling with something that stretches a lot, well, then you might stretch the thing a foot and not move the other object an inch. That's a problem. That would be disastrous for our bodies. So fascia, like I said, doesn't really stretch, and it's a good thing that it doesn't. In fact, based on what I've understood from research that's out there, in order to get fascia to stretch appreciably, we're talking like more than 1% of its length change, you'd have to pull, depending on the piece of tissue, with hundreds if not thousands of pounds of force. This is way more than you're getting with a piece of foam, or even with a really strong massage, right? So something to think about. Wanted to share some of these thoughts. I might do a second video in a little bit addressing a specific issue with a paper that was published not too long ago and got shared online. But I'm going to end this video here. Just wanted to share some thoughts, like I said, about foam rolling, about fascia, just some really quick basic things. So hopefully you got something out of that. Thanks.